And the winner is Peter Falk, Columbo.
A script arrived on NBC's desk in 1973. It would have displayed America's preferred A detective dealing with an unmotivated murderer. Simply nasty network executives were in a frenzy. And claimed it was too, so they locked it away. They said it was too dark for TV. Although spectators weren't prepared, the actual why this episode of Columbo remained buried for half a century was far more dark today. We're revealing what they attempted to conceal when Hollywood reached a grinding halt at the beginning of 1960 because of a struggling with the second strike of the writer-authors Richard Levinson and William Link discovered that they were in a hurry to earn a living, but rather than waiting they discovered a cunning little gap. They discovered that live television wasn't part of the strike limitations, so they went ahead and Right Enough, a murder mystery. NBC's new live color shows Rope. It was hurried in the Chevy Mystery Show. Desperate, even deceiving themselves' own representative to sell it, but in that something amazing with a sloppy little writing. Was born as a mysterious, rumpled investigator named Lieutenant Columbo. They were unaware of this desperate attempt would become a legendary figure in pop culture. Wasn't even they had been reading something very original. Stavsky's Offense, Penalty, and the Porfiry Petrovich, the detective in that novel, gave them the notion of a quiet man who appeared innocuous but was actually they wanted someone who was bright. Columbo to be rather than exposing the murderer at the conclusion, similar to most tales they choose to expose the murderer at the starting in such manner, the source of the stress observing how, with all of his questions and peculiarities would gradually ensnare. It was witty, new, and psychological, and individuals adored it. The Columbo wasn't even Peter at start. On July 31, 1960, Falk, the character, was performed live by Bert Freed. Broadcast, he performed well in silence. Cautious, but the true magic remained. 2 years later, years distant, the tale was evolved into the play Prescription. Thomas Mitchell and Murder played when Columbo performed. The crowds enjoyed it. Even if Broadway never saw it. Unfortunately, that would be Mitchell's last role before to his passing, but things actually altered in 1968, when the BBC chose to make suggestion, turn Murder into a television film, and Peter Falk was cast this time. Wasn't Lee J. Cobb's first pick, and despite each of their rejections, Bing Crosby fit the role that Falk offered Columbo flawlessly. Something fresh, a peculiar charm combined with razor-sharp focus in the initial film that he was in fact somewhat clean-cut. Was tidy, his outfit was ironed, and the well-known however, the raincoat made its appearance, and it remained in that raincoat. Falk forever purchased it on his own during a downpour, and he wore it in New York for about $15. As it turns out, the film continued to wear it wasn't just a coat that happened to be actually created by a wealthy Spanish business, but to Falk, it was simply the look. He even began bringing his own clothing to match the outfits and shoes. Even the vehicle he chose, that unkempt old, it all contributed to the creation of an undressed detective who felt authentic by a team of stylists. What created Columbo? What was even more intriguing was how Falk played him. He wasn't merely feigning to. Falk would make up things as he played mind games. Mid-scene, lines become sidetracked and start to throw away the performers who were meant to be. They appeared annoyed. Guilty, it worked. As anxious as their characters if you were to take out a grocery list rather than providing proof or asking to borrow a pencil without any justification, these were trickery. Not coincidences that the actors were unaware of it, but the viewers were, which made Columbo is even more entertaining to watch. And of course, there's still one more line. Something that was not included in the slogan. Levinson and Link have a brilliant plan. Acknowledge that they included it solely because the sequence was too brief. They didn't want must have Columbo walk in order to retype it. Return to the room, say it, and that's it. How the most well-known detective move on TV was what began as a lazy fix evolved into a hallmark moment, which typically indicated the Columbo character is doomed by the killer. was so distinctive that his moniker persisted. A puzzle after all those years of watching. I was never particularly familiar with his first name. You might occasionally run into Frank Columbo on a hazy badge, but the designers claimed that they didn't give him a first name, and they desired it to remain that way. When Fred Worth, a trivia writer, made up the fact that Philip Columbo to prevent imitations and Trivial Pursuits fell for it, and he filed a lawsuit against them. Lost, yet the legend persisted even at everyone at Columbo's nephew's wedding. Imagine going if you merely named him a lieutenant. Since your family doesn't even use your first name behind you. Scenes from the casting process were simply each show featured guest stars and was equally intense. Who played for the team and the killers? Frequently regarded as hundreds of actors for a single role, they even examined icons such as Orson Welles, and the sellers of Peter Sears demanded a lot of money. That Falk himself had to be passed. Rejected a few recommendations and vetoed them. Danny Kaye without ever stating the reason. When the initial development of Columbo, NBC executives were dubious in 1971. In reality, they were concerned about television. Had regulations at the time, and the hero had to up immediately, or others may alter the channel, but the Columbo makers William Link and Richard Levinson didn't. They made the audience care about the regulations. Wait for Columbo for about half an hour. Even appeared, that type of delay had never before, and executives referred to as the longest delay, and they believed that consumers of television history would become disinterested and depart. But what transpired next turned the whole detective genre in reverse. Rather of a usually, the show told you who did it. Immediately identifying the murderer, who was the turn of events where you witnessed the murder. You observed how meticulously the strategy was implemented together, after which you sat back and observed how this modest, unconfident investigator would rip the scheme apart slowly. People believed that becoming aware of the murderer would result in death. The tension, but it didn't create things more intensely, turning into a contest of how, not if, he would capture them. And Columbo didn't drive or use firearms. Every day, he asked courteous questions to chases. Reasoning and a keen sense of small details, such as a smudge on a thermostat or a wine glass set too low. But there was another factor. All of that underlying made Columbo so forceful. It had to do with the Columbia class. Wasn't wealthy, and he had a worn-out automobile. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories.